I stood at the polished granite kitchen island, carefully trimming the thick stems of a dozen white roses. They were for my daughter Sarah. Her university graduation was supposed to be this weekend, and I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. For the past 4 years, I had covered her rent, her tuition, her textbooks, and every surprise mechanic bill. Seeing her walk across that stage was the only return on investment I cared about. The morning sun caught the dew on the petals, making them gleam. I wiped my hands on a clean linen towel and dialed her number, smiling to myself. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" Her voice sounded brisk, distracted. I could hear the faint hum of background chatter and clinking glasses. "I was just wondering when the graduation ceremony officially starts," I asked, picking up a stray leaf from the counter. "Should I bring the flowers directly to the ceremony, or would it be easier if I brought them to your apartment afterward?" A heavy, awkward pause filled the line. "Oh," she muttered. A light, dismissive laugh followed. "I graduated yesterday, Mom. It was just a small event. Only close family." I stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. My hand froze mid-air. Close family. I was her mother. I had funded the very life that allowed her to stand on that stage. Yet when the time came to celebrate, I was apparently just a distant relative, deliberately excluded. "I see," I breathed out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break down. At 64, having outlived my husband and rebuilt my life, I didn't have the energy for useless tears. "Congratulations, Sarah." "Thanks. Listen, I gotta run. David's parents are taking us out to brunch to celebrate." She hung up before I could say goodbye. I stared at the phone screen, then down at the expensive white roses. They suddenly looked ridiculous out of place in my quiet home. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. I walked over to the trash can and dropped the bouquet in stems and all. I walked to the sink, washed my hands with deliberate slowness, and opened my laptop. If I wasn't close family, I shouldn't be paying close family expenses. The next morning, I woke up with a very clear, completely unapologetic to-do list. The morning light spilled across my dining table as I spread out my bank statements. I had always kept meticulous records. Years of running a household on a single income after my husband passed had taught me one undeniable truth: numbers never lie, even when people do. I dragged a bright yellow highlighter across every single line item related to Sarah. The numbers stacked up quickly, ruthless and undeniable. Rent, $1, $200. Car insurance, $150. Cell phone plan, $85. Extras and emergency transfers, roughly $300 a month. The monthly total was staggering. I had spent years convincing myself I was giving her a head start in life, cushioning her fall so she could focus on her studies. In reality, I was strictly funding a comfortable lifestyle for someone who didn't even want me in her graduation photos. I didn't call her to argue. I didn't write a long, emotional text demanding an explanation or an apology. Explanations wouldn't refund my money, and forced apologies wouldn't change the reality of how she viewed me. First, I logged into my primary banking portal. I navigated to the Automatic Transfers tab. There it was, the recurring $1, $200 scheduled for the first of every month, clearly labeled Sarah's rent. With 2 simple clicks, I canceled it completely. Next, I opened the family phone plan portal. Removing a secondary line took less than 3 minutes. A small warning popped up stating that her service would be officially cut off by midnight. I confirmed the change without hesitation. Finally, I logged into the auto insurance portal and removed her vehicle from my policy. I closed the laptop, letting it click shut in the silent room. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of black coffee. The house was quiet, but it was a comfortable, solid quiet. For the first time in years, my money belonged entirely to me. I wasn't a victim, and I wasn't going to sit around acting like one. I had simply adjusted my financial strategy to match my new relationship status with my daughter. I didn't have to wait long to see how much my sudden absence would cost her. A full week passed without a single word from Sarah. No texts checking in, no calls, no apologies for excluding me. She was completely silent entirely, wrapped up in her new post-graduation life with her husband David. On the seventh day, right around lunchtime, my phone violently buzzed against the marble counter. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 full times calmly, taking a sip of my iced tea before finally picking up. She panicked, skipping a greeting entirely. Her voice was breathy and fast. My landlord just emailed me. He says the rent is late and he's charging a massive late fee. Did you transfer it? I leaned back against the kitchen counter, casually tracing the rim of my glass with my index finger. Didn't I tell you? I replied smoothly. Tell me what? What are you talking about? I only provide financial support for close family. I stated, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. Since I don't fit that description anymore, I assumed you and David had it covered. You're graduates now. Are you serious right now? She snapped her voice, pitching up into a shrill register. You're doing this because of the graduation. David's parents wanted an intimate dinner. That's all. You're being so petty. I'm being financially responsible. I corrected her gently. You are an adult with a degree. It's time you manage your own living expenses. Oh, and your phone and car insurance were officially cut off last week. I suggest you look into new plans before you drive anywhere. Mom, you can't just do that without warning. That's not fair. I just did. I pulled the phone away from my ear and tapped the red end button. No yelling, no pleading. Just a simple, concrete boundary, firmly placed. Almost immediately, the phone started ringing again. I didn't answer. I switched the device to silent mode, placed it face down on the counter, and walked out to the back porch to read my novel in the afternoon sun. But Sarah wasn't going to give up her personal ATM that easily. The very next afternoon, a familiar gray sedan pulled aggressively into my driveway. I watched through the sheer living room curtains as Sarah and David marched up the front walkway. David always had this smug, entitled way of walking, his shoulders pushed back like the world owed him a favor just for showing up. Before they could even pound on the door, I opened it, standing squarely in the frame. We need to talk, Sarah demanded, attempting to push past me into the hallway. David followed closely behind, carrying a dark blue folder under his arm. They headed straight for my kitchen and sat at my dining table as if they owned the place. I remained standing by the island, crossing my arms, watching them. Mom, this little tantrum has to stop. Sarah sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples. You cutting off my phone in the middle of a billing cycle is incredibly immature. David had to scramble to put me on his plan, and it cost us extra activation fees. David cleared his throat, leaning forward and resting his elbows on my clean table. Lucy, we understand you're feeling left out, but reacting this way isn't healthy for anyone. We printed out a temporary budget. He tapped the blue folder confidently. If you just reinstate the rent transfer for the next 6 months until Sarah secures a job, we can put all this behind us. I stared at the folder, then shifted my gaze to his face. He genuinely thought he had the right to manage my money. Take your folder off my table. I ordered quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. David blinked, his polite, condescending mask slipping slightly. Excuse me. You are guests in my home, I reminded them, standing tall. Guests do not make financial demands. I will not fund your lifestyle, David. And Sarah, your rent is strictly your problem. Sarah stood up violently, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Fine. If you're going to act like this, we're leaving. Don't expect us to visit anytime soon. I wasn't, I replied calmly. They stormed out, muttering under their breath. As the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind them, I walked over to the entryway bowl where I kept spare items. They thought they still had full access to my life, But I was about to change the locks on that too. The spare house key Sarah kept on her keychain had been bothering me ever since they left. For years, she had a habit of dropping by unannounced, treating my house like a free storage unit, a laundromat, and a personal grocery store. The very next morning, the air was crisp. I drove my SUV down to the local hardware store on Main Street. I walked down the aisles and picked out 2 heavy-duty brass deadbolts. I didn't need anyone's permission, nor did I need to explain myself to secure my own property. By noon, I was back home with a screwdriver in hand. I unscrewed the old locks and installed the new ones myself. The satisfying, heavy click of the new bolts sliding into place felt like an anchor dropping, securing my peace of mind. With the house physically secure, I turned my attention to the guest room down the hall. It was still packed with Sarah's old college boxes, heavy winter coats, and random pieces of furniture she and David didn't want cluttering their own apartment. I spent the entire afternoon hauling every single box out to the garage. I swept the hardwood floors, opened the large windows to let the fresh autumn breeze in, and carried my sewing machine and painting supplies into the newly emptied room. It was no longer her free storage unit. It was my personal studio. Just as I was setting up my wooden easel by the window, the doorbell chimed. It was my next-door neighbor, Martha, holding a plate of fresh oatmeal raisin cookies. "Saw you hauling boxes from the yard." She smiled warmly, stepping inside as I held the door. Spring cleaning in late autumn. Something exactly like that. I chuckled, leading her to the kitchen to brew some tea. Over hot mugs, I gave her the short, unembellished version of the story. Martha didn't offer pity or unsolicited advice. She just nodded slowly, taking a thoughtful bite of her cookie. "Good for you, Lucy," she affirmed. "You spent over 20 years raising her. Your job is done. It's time to live for yourself." Her words settled deep in my chest, warm and undeniably true. The house finally felt entirely mine, just in time for the next storm to hit. For 3 glorious weeks, my life was blissfully quiet. I painted in my new studio, I read thick mystery novels on the porch, and I joined a morning walking group with Martha at the local park. I didn't check my bank account with that familiar, lingering dread anymore. The extra money piling up securely in my savings account felt exactly like freedom. Then came Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch swing, enjoying a tall glass of iced tea, when my phone screen lit up violently with a barrage of text messages. They were all from Sarah. "Mom, I just tried to use the emergency credit card at the vet for Buster, and it declined. Did you cancel this too? Hello. Are you ignoring me? Buster needs his shots. Mom, you're punishing your granddog now. This is ridiculous." I read the text calmly, feeling my heart rate stay perfectly steady. The emergency card was a joint credit card I had given her 2 years ago for true emergencies. I had quietly closed that account the exact same day I canceled her rent. She just hadn't tried to swipe it until now. A routine vet visit for an expensive breed of dog she consciously chose to buy was absolutely not my emergency. I typed a single precise reply. "I closed that account weeks ago. You are an adult. You are responsible for your own pets." I hit send and immediately muted her notifications. I didn't owe her a debate. I didn't need to justify my financial decisions. Adults pay for their own dogs. 10 minutes later, the screen flashed with an incoming call from David. I simply pressed the red button, declining the call immediately. They were finally realizing that the safety net was completely gone and the panic was setting in. But they couldn't manipulate me if I flat out refused to give them an audience. Silence is a great teacher, but my daughter was proving to be a terrible student. Sunday morning arrived with a loud, aggressive pounding on my front door that rattled the glass panes. I set down my coffee mug, walked to the entryway, and glanced out the brass peephole. Sarah stood on the porch, her arms crossed tight, glaring at the wood. David was hovering right behind her, looking thoroughly annoyed. I unlocked the new brass deadbolt and opened the door just a few inches, keeping the heavy metal security chain securely attached. "My key doesn't work," Sarah snapped immediately, shoving her keychain toward the gap in the door. "I know," I answered, my tone flat. "I changed the locks." "Why?" "Because you're trying to shut me out. You're treating me like a criminal." "Because it is my house and you do not live here," I stated matter-of-factly. "What do you want, Sarah? I want to know what your problem is," she yelled, her voice echoing shrilly in the quiet tree-lined neighborhood. "You're acting totally crazy. Over one stupid dinner, you're literally cutting me off because you didn't get a piece of cake. I'm cutting you off because you told me loud and clear where I stand in your life." I replied, my voice dangerously calm, refusing to match her volume. "You wanted total independence. You wanted a life where I'm just a distant observer. I am giving you exactly what you asked for. Observers don't pay rent." David stepped forward, trying to peek through the gap. "Mrs. Hoffman, be reasonable. We had to put the vet bill on a high-interest credit card. You're intentionally putting us in debt." "No, David," I corrected him sharply, looking him dead in the eye. "Your choices are putting you in debt. Have a good day." I closed the door gently in their faces and slid the bolt home with a loud, definitive click. Through the solid wood, I could hear Sarah huffing in absolute disbelief. They lingered on the porch for 5 minutes, fully expecting me to open the door and surrender. I simply walked back to my coffee. If they thought a little guilt trip would break my resolve, they were sorely mistaken. A full month rolled by. The harsh reality of their new financial situation must have hit them hard, because I noticed a subtle shift in their tactics. Instead of angry, demanding outbursts, I started receiving passive-aggressive check-in texts from Sarah. "Hope you're having a good week. Really stressed about bills right now. Wish things were different." I completely ignored them. I was busy sitting at my laptop booking a 2-week premium cruise to Alaska for myself. I used the exact amount of money I would have otherwise spent on her rent and expenses for the past 2 months. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was tending to my garden, I received a text from Sarah that was slightly different. "David's parents are coming to visit this weekend. Our apartment is way too small to host them properly. We're going to host them at your house for a dinner party on Saturday night. Make sure the house is clean and the fridge is stocked." I stared at the screen, wiping a smudge of dirt from my forehead, genuinely amazed at the audacity. She didn't ask. She simply ordered. She still assumed her old key worked, or that she could simply command me to open my doors and serve her in-laws. I didn't reply. I didn't warn her. Let her make her grand plans. Let her tell David's parents whatever elaborate lies she wanted about having access to my home. Saturday evening quickly approached. I invited Martha over. We popped a large bowl of popcorn, opened a beautiful bottle of Merlot, and queued up a classic black-and-white movie in the living room. I intentionally kept the front porch lights switched off. At exactly 6:00 p.m., a large polished SUV pulled into my driveway. Sarah, David, and 2 older people, David's parents, got out. Sarah marched confidently up to the front door, inserted her silver key into the lock, and tried to turn it. It wouldn't budge. She tried again, forcefully jiggling the brass handle. Inside, Martha took a slow sip of her wine and raised an amused eyebrow at me. I just smiled, completely relaxed, and ate a piece of popcorn. The performance was about to begin, and I had a front-row seat. Sarah knocked frantically on the door, her confidence rapidly evaporating. Through the sheer curtains, I watched David's parents exchange confused, uncomfortable glances on my front steps. Sarah pulled out her phone and called me. My phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. I answered it on speaker for Martha to hear. "Mom, open the door," she hissed. "My key is jammed and David's parents are standing in the cold." "It's not jammed, Sarah," I said, smoothly, leaning back into the sofa cushions. "It's the wrong key. I told you a month ago I changed the locks." "Well, open it. We're having dinner here. I promised them. No, you aren't, I replied, my voice unyielding. You didn't ask me to host a dinner party. You demanded it via text. This is my private home, not your free event space. Mom, please. You're going to embarrass me. Her voice finally cracked genuine panic, replacing her arrogance. You embarrassed yourself by lying to them about having access to my house, I pointed out coldly. I only host close family. Remember, enjoy your evening. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the table. Outside, Sarah stood entirely frozen. She slowly turned back to her in-laws, her face pale under the porch light. David looked furious, gesturing sharply toward the car. Without another word, they all piled back into the SUV in heavy silence and drove away. Martha chuckled softly from the sofa. Well, Lucy, that was infinitely better than the movie. Much better. I agreed, pouring us both another glass of wine. I had taken back my money, my space, and my peace of mind. There were no arguments left to be had. The storm had finally passed, and the air in my home felt incredibly clear. 6 months later, the Alaskan air was crisp and wonderfully invigorating. I stood on the private balcony of my cruise cabin, watching massive glaciers glide silently by in the deep blue water. I felt lighter and younger than I had in a decade. Back in America, things had settled into a peaceful routine. From what Martha told me, Sarah had been forced to take on a weekend retail job to cover her bills, and David sold his expensive gaming setup to fix their car. They were finally learning how the real world worked entirely without my wallet buffering their falls. Sarah actually sent me a text on my birthday last week. Happy birthday. Hope you're well. No demands, no passive-aggressive manipulation, no requests for a bridge loan. Just a simple greeting. I replied, thank you. I didn't block her number, but I didn't invite her back into my daily life either. True freedom means choosing exactly who has the key and on what terms. I had set my boundaries, and I was effortlessly enforcing them. I walked back inside my warm cabin. Tomorrow I was scheduled to go whale watching. Life was far too short, and my savings account far too healthy to waste time waiting around for an invitation to my own life. I smiled to myself and headed up to the dining hall. The rest of my life was just beginning, and for the very first time, I was the sole captain navigating the ship.